To me, this is probably what it is, the most difficult chapter in Revelation to explain. Chapter 9. The Kaaba. This is a picture of the Kaaba in Mecca, Saudi Arabia. These are rows of men, only men, marching around the same direction of the Kaaba. Eventually they work their way into the center section, and they actually get to go touch the Kaaba and go through it, and there's a black stone in there. They get to kiss it or touch it or whatever. Yet they say that's not idolatry. Revelation lesson 13 of 26. This is chapter 9 by me, Ellis Jones. The rise of Islam. The Muslims, Arabs, first the Arabs come they don't have guns, they don't have firearms. The Turks later come along and they do have firearms, including cannons. They knock down the walls of Constantinople and destroy the the Roman Empire in the east. Our text for the lesson is found here in Revelation 9, 20 through 23 and 21. Lesson text. This is not the whole chapter. This is just a text. Lesson text. The rest of mankind who were not killed by these plagues did not repent of the works of their hands, that is, idolatry, so as not to worship demons. And Paul says that the worship of idols is worshiping demons, and the idols of gold and of silver and of brass and of stone and of wood, which can neither see nor hear nor walk. And they did not repent of their murders, nor of their sorceries, nor of the immorality, nor of their thefts. Now, when we talk about idolatry, and at that particular time, the idolatry was in the Catholic Church or the Orthodox Church in the East. Both Catholic Church, the Roman Catholic in the West and the Eastern Orthodox Church, both had statues and images of the Virgin Mary and the saints and so forth, and they paid homage to them. They say they're not worshiping, they're venerating them, but it's the same thing. Here it shows the lands, the area that was conquered by the Arab Muslims. Notice they went into Spain. They were stopped by the King of France, Charles Martel. They were stopped, and so they never did fully. Well, they did occupy Spain, but they never really had a secure foothold there in Europe. Never had a secure foothold in Europe. Introduction. In this chapter, we see first the Arab Muslims, then the terrible Turks, also Muslims, conquering the Eastern Roman Empire and North Africa. Well, North Africa was a part of the Eastern Roman Empire and also part of the Western Roman Empire at one time. It is my belief that God allows these things to come about because the Eastern Church had not learned from the barbarian invasions in the West. Remember when the Roman Church was overcome by the barbarians and they lost their empire, it had become even more morally corrupt and idolatrous. Neither had the Western Church gotten God's message. This is a representation of the bottomless pit, or the abyss. The Bible uses both terms. Revelation 9, 1 through 3. Then the fifth angel sounded, and I saw a star fall from heaven, which had fallen to earth, and the key of the bottomless pit was given to him. Now there's an angel, Abaddon or Apollyon, who's the angel of the bottomless pit. He is the supernatural guardian or keeper of the bottomless pit. So this fallen star is a human being, a person, and the angel of the bottomless pit gives him the key to the bottomless pit. He's going to be allowed to open it, and creatures are going to come out to serve him and his message, his purpose. They look like locusts. They're not really locusts, but they look like and act like locusts in some ways, and scorpions. He opens the bottomless pit, and smoke went up out of the pit, like the smoke of a great furnace, and the sun and the air were darkened by the smoke of the pit. And in symbology, smoke can represent confusion, doctrinal error and confusion. Then out of the smoke came locusts upon the earth, and power was given to them, and the scorpion of the earth, as the scorpions of the earth, have power. Now what's the power of the scorpions of the earth? It's in their poison and their stinger, right? They bring great misery, great pain and misery to human beings. I've never been stung by a scorpion, but my sister was, and I'll tell you, it's a terrible thing to be around someone who's been stung by a scorpion. Here's a falling star. I think that represents Muhammad. That this star fell from heaven might not mean a person was a divine being who lost his position in heaven, or that he really had belonged in the true heaven of the angels. The heaven here might just mean the sky. He was in an exalted position on the earth, actually, in religion, I think, in religion and politics and government. And that's true of Muhammad. His parents, his ancestors were keepers of the Kaaba, and they were a priestly class. Remember, these are symbols. The star might be a man who once had an exalted position. His falling meant he would become a servant of Satan, or just a servant of mankind too. He was in an inferior position. He fell from an exalted and superior position to an inferior position. We're given control of these fierce, destructive warrior horsemen. The Old Testament speaks of the plague of locusts as being the army of the Lord. Here it's an army of horsemen, cavalrymen, and the Arabs are all the warriors were cavalrymen. They didn't actually have an infantry. The smoke. Let's see what it says about that. The smoke was the confusion of false teaching inspired by demons. 1 Timothy 4:1 talks about the doctrines of demons. The bottomless pit, or the abyss, was a prison of demons. Luke 8:31 is the story about Jesus cast the demons out of Legion. They said, "Don't send us into the abyss. Let us go into this herd of swine, the pigs." So they did. Jesus granted them that request. They went into this herd of swine and rushed into the lake and were drowned. They didn't want to go into the abyss because they'd have to stay there eternally unless someone let them out, unless someone got permission from Apollyon, the angel of the bottomless pit, to let them out. The fallen star would have directional control. That is, he could have directed him, and they were the boss, the leader of the demonic locust-like creatures. Locust-like creatures, demon locust-like creatures. But he himself would actually be under the control of the destroyer, the angel of the pit. Now the destroyer is the Greek, the Hebrew and Greek translation of Apollyon and Abaddon, or Abaddon. Here we see the locusts coming up out of the pit. Locust-like creatures. Remember, these are demonic creatures. They're spiritual creatures, but they take on a physical, literal form. It's not really locusts. It's not really locusts, but it's something like locusts. Locusts symbolize what they are. Revelation, the book of symbols. Revelation 9, we continue reading Revelation 9, this time verses 4 through 6. 4 through 6. They were told not to hurt the grass of the earth, nor any green thing, nor any tree, but only the men who did not have the seal of God on their foreheads. Now this is contrary to the nature of locusts. That's what they eat. That's what they do hurt, with grass and trees and anything green. But these things are symbols. Anything green means it's living. It has spiritual life. It has eternal life. They're saved creatures. They can't hurt the ones that are saved, but they can only do those who do not have the seal of God on their forehead. In other words, they can hurt non-Christians spiritually. They can kill them physically, but they can't hurt them spiritually. Their danger is in the spiritual, the false teachings. And that's the poison that's in the tail, the false teaching. And they were not permitted to kill anyone, but to torment for 5 months. Now 5 months, the day for a year in prophecy, so that makes 350 years, I believe. And their torment was like the torment of a scorpion when it stings a man. Like I said, I've never been stung by a scorpion, but I've been close to people who were, and I'll tell you, it must be a very painful thing. Some scorpions actually kill people. They're so dangerous. I don't think any of those in the United States, but some in Africa are so poisonous that they can actually kill people. And in those days, men will seek death and will not find it. They will long to die, and death flees from them. Now, we're not talking about Christians. We're talking about people that are not Christians that are stung by these scorpions. That the poisonous doctrine that's in the tail, or the aftermath of their conquest, is so devastating to the spiritual well-being that they would like to die. Well, how would they like to die? Would they like to die physically, or would they like to die spiritually? We'll talk more about that later, because these scorpions cannot kill anyone. We've already seen that, but we'll have more to say about that later. Here we have another picture of a scorpion, the locust-like scorpion creatures. The locust power. Now where's the power? In the tail. They have tails like scorpions. Grass, green things, and trees might have double meanings, literal and figurative, because it is true that Muhammad gave his armies orders not to hurt any green thing, not to kill any fruit trees, not to destroy any crops, because they needed all those. Locusts normally would do that, would destroy those crops, but these locusts were horsemen. They would not do that. The figure of green thing is spiritually alive. Luke 23:31, he talks about the green tree. The dry tree is the dead one, the green tree is the live one. Probably those sealed by God. Christians, grass and trees are men of low and high estate. They were not to hurt those sealed. This is another proof that these sealed are all Christians, not just Jews. Jews and Gentiles who are Christians. It is strange that locusts would not hurt green plants. So these were not literal locusts, nor were the green plants literal plants, but Christians. These were not literal scorpions like this one. They could torment but not kill. They could torment unsealed people, these persons, that is non-Christian, for 5 months, that's 150 years, if prophetic time symbol, but could not kill anyone. If you ever been stung by a scorpion, you will know how painful it is. If the pain continues indefinitely, it becomes unbearable torment. Those so tormented wish they could die and end the torment, but they cannot. This torment is not physical, but spiritual. Now I have to keep emphasizing these were not Christians who were tormented. These were non-Christians. Basically Muslims, those who were conquered by the Muslims and forced by the edge of the sword to become Muslim, to convert. Could torment but not kill. We have more to say about that on this page. Please note that this demonic locust army could not torment Christians, those who have the seal of God in their foreheads, nor could the locusts kill anyone. They couldn't kill Christians spiritually. They couldn't kill them spiritually. They couldn't kill even the Muslims. They couldn't kill them spiritually, because spiritually, death, burial, and resurrection of Christ, where the old man is killed and so forth, they didn't have any concept of a death, burial, and resurrection, or sin, or death of the old man, or anything like that. So we're talking spiritual here. They could torment only those who are not Christians, the unsealed, but they could not kill anyone. That does not sound like Arab Muslims, jihadis, but that's exactly what they were. Here we have Muhammad and his horse. I guess that's what that represents. Not permitted to kill anyone. We have to spend a lot of time on that because it's something very difficult to understand. But you have to think of it in spiritual terms. This statement that the demonic locust creatures that combine the properties of ferocious beasts and human warriors were not permitted to kill anyone. This is a very difficult statement to explain. If taken literally, since as I believe this has already happened and is past history, before our time, if the killing is spiritual, this should be easy to explain. And I think it is. We know that Muslim armies did literally kill many people, including Christians. We know in our own time they behead the ISIS and Islamic jihadis. They've tortured and killed many people. They burned them to death. They've cut their throats. They've cut off their heads and so forth. So this is a spiritual killing. They had no power in their doctrine or their power to cause the death of the old man, the resurrection to a new life, the forgiveness of sins. That's not a concept that the Muslims have. Revelation 9:7-9. The appearance of the locusts was as horses prepared for battle. As I said before, these are horsemen, these are cavalry, and on their heads appeared to be crowns like gold. Now they say the Muslim warriors had yellow turbans, and their faces were like the faces of men, and they're bearded, so we could definitely see from a distance that their faces were the faces of men because they had turbans on their heads and they had beards. I'm sure that's what is meant here. They had hair like that of women. Now they have long hair, but they roll it up. They don't cut their hair. They roll it up and put it under their turban. And their teeth were like the teeth of lions. Now the teeth of a lion a lion is a very ferocious creature, but some think that the teeth of lion, they had swords, and those are the teeth of the lion. Symbolically, that could be true. They had breastplates like breastplates of iron, and the sound of their wings was like the sound of chariots of many horses rushing to battle. And that's what it actually was. Chariots, a horseman, chariots. I don't know if the Muslims had chariots or not, but they had horsemen, and they must have been galloping. Thousands of them galloping into battle must have made a terrific sound. Here we have one that shows a rifle, but the Arabs didn't have rifles at the time of this prophecy. The Arab of Revelation did not have rifles. The appearance. More about the appearance. We already talked about that a little bit, but we had more here about the appearance. These were composite creatures combining the attributes listed: war horses, crowns of victory, long hair with teeth or weapons like lion's teeth, swords and spears maybe, perhaps, or just depicting fierceness. Iron armor, breastplates, probably had shields, wings depicting speed of attack. They move very quickly, rapidly over the face of the earth. And men's faces, meaning the beasts were basically fierce, well-armed human cavalry, and they probably had beards. Now this is Muhammad's creature. This creature was a flying horse, sort of like the Greek legend of Pegasus. Muhammad's al-Barak. The steed of the prophet was said to be a composite creature from the heavens, resembling a horse with wings, with a human-like face. So Muhammad, the Muslims, they had their composite creatures. Of course, the Hebrews in the Old Testament had their composite creatures, like the cherubim and the seraphim, that had faces of a man, an ox, a lion, and an eagle. But they had the body of a lion. See the description in. I don't know what that was. Oh, I think there's something up there. I can't read it. His followers are represented as being composite creatures, combining some of the properties of men, locusts, horses, scorpions, and lions. Mention is made of their wings. I think the symbol is entirely appropriate to depict Muslim warriors, horsemen, cavalry. These are Arab Muslim armies. Go on to Revelation 9:10 through 12. They have tails like scorpions and stings, and in their tails is their power to hurt men for 5 months. They have a king over them, the angel of the abyss. His name in Hebrew is Abaddon, and in Greek his name is Apollyon, meaning in English the destroyer. The first word, woe, this we're continue reading in that Revelation here, Revelation 9. The first woe is past. Behold, two woes are still coming after these things. The tails and their king. The sting or torment from their tails came behind or in the aftermath of their victories, and their power to hurt, torment, was limited to 5 months, and symbol 150 years. And this is the time that the conquest of the Arab Muslims took place. After the 150 years, Baghdad, their capital, became what they call a city of peace, and they had relationship with European kings and so forth. So this new rise of Muslim aggression is something new in our time. But for many, many years, the Muslims were not like that. Were not like they are today. They were in the beginning, but they changed after 150 years they changed. The king is the destroyer. That's what his name means in those two languages, Hebrew and Greek. He is also the angel of the abyss. Now the fallen star was not the angel. Remember, the angel gave him the key to the bottomless pit. But it said that the angel of the bottomless pit is the king over these demons. And that's true. The Apollyon is the king over the demons. But they serve the fallen star. This vast demon-powered army is controlled by a desire to destroy. The angel is the destroying angel, and these locusts, they came out to destroy. Here we see a picture of an actual plague of locusts. Now these creatures, these flying creatures here are all actual locusts. They certainly don't have tails like scorpions, but or teeth like lions, or faces like men, or crowns of gold, but they are creatures that they'll eat every green thing in sight. So we're talking symbolically of the demonic locusts. They're totally different from these guys. The meaning. The destroying locusts symbolize destroying armies. In the Old Testament, there are several places where there are plagues of locusts, and they're called armies, destroying armies. I believe God tells Nahum that he's going to send his army. They could not kill anyone. If this has spiritual meaning, it must mean that the doctrine would not have fatal consequences upon those who were conquered by this army. Or it may have another meaning, which I will attempt to explain. I'm having trouble. Here we have a story about what baptism does. Washes, cleanses, and so forth, sanctifies and all that, but it takes the old man of sin, he dies, and he goes to, the old man of sin is buried in the waters of baptism. When he comes forth, he's a new creature, he's born again. And this is something the Muslims, the Turks, the Arab and Turk Muslims, neither one of those groups, they had that in their teaching. Those are good scriptures for you to look up if you don't already know that. And you can pause the video and look those up if you'd like. Not kill anyone. I have more to say about that now. Islam has no doctrine of sin. Christian doctrine has the sinner alive to Satan and sin. In the process of conversion, he dies to sin and becomes alive to God. This takes place in baptism, in which the old man of sin, or the body of sin, is put to death. Romans 6:1-4. In Islam, there is no putting to death of the old man of sin and being raised in newness of life and forgiven. So in Christianity, in a sense, the sinner is put to death or killed. They're then raised to be forgiven and have a new relationship with God. Now, can you imagine the people, they have consciences. I mean, Islam doesn't destroy their consciences. They have consciences, and they know they're sinners. They know they've done wrong. They'd love to be forgiven. They'd love to have a relationship with God, but they don't know. They're not sure what their relationship with God is. But we're sure if we're baptized, because the old man of sin has been destroyed. We've been born again. We're now children of God, and we have a relationship with God. He's forgiven us all of our sins, and as long as we walk in His Word, He continues to forgive us of our sin. And if we realize we're a sinner, we've done something wrong, we go to Him and ask for forgiveness, He forgives us. Well, Muslims have no teaching like that. So it's a torment. It's a constant pain and misery for them to live their religion and not know that they're forgiven. It should be very tormenting. I believe that's the explanation. Here's another chart that shows baptism. As I said before, you can pause the chart. You can pause this slide and look these up if you'd like to do that. I'm not going to go through all of them now. I don't have time. No death to sin in Islam. In Islam, and as I understand it, the meaning, is the teaching, man is saved by submitting to God and doing good works. Like he can earn his salvation, I guess. We know from the Bible that that's not possible. Man can do nothing to earn his salvation. But he has no need of a Savior. They reject the concept of atoning sacrifice. There's great torment in having no assurance that one's misdeeds are forgiven. The Muslims sin, they know they sin, they do things are wrong, they know they're going against what God teaches, they know they've offended God, but what can they do about it? Just hope that God will forgive them in the end, I guess. But Islam can give no such assurance of forgiveness of sins. This was a bed sheet. This is taken from a bed sheet chart by one of our brethren before the use of electronic technology. They used to make their own charts using the pulpit. They'd hang them up and they'd preach from those charts. I guess some people still do that, but now we have slideshows and so forth. But this is the old time, this is the horse and buggy days. Here we have another map of the Mideast showing the Arab lands. Here's Johnson's explanation. This is B.W. Johnson in his book, the Prophecies Unveiled, what's it called? Something about the vision. Vision of the Ages. Vision of the Ages, his commentary on Revelation. And this is his explanation. The locust, the horse, the horseman, the scorpion, and indeed all the symbols point to Arabia as the source from whence the locust came. I believe there ought to be no reasonable doubt that the uprising of the Mohammedan or Saracen, we call them Arab, power is meant. The Western Roman Empire had fallen in AD 476. There yet existed the Eastern Roman Empire, with Constantinople for a capital, called the Greek Empire, also the Eastern Orthodox Church and Empire. Against it, the Saracen effort was especially directed. Now, of course, the Arab Muslims didn't have firearms, and so they never could conquer Constantinople. Turks came along with their cannons later, and they were also Muslim, but they were able to do it. They were able to knock down the walls and conquer Constantinople and the Eastern Roman Empire. That was the end of the Eastern Roman Empire. But that happened in much later. Okay, this is the Byzantine or the Eastern Roman Empire. It was Eastern, part of Europe and part of the East. Let us see how that movement corresponds to the symbols. It was the right time, after AD 476, in the right place, directed against the eastern part of the old Roman world. Not only the facts just mentioned, but the description of the men symbolized by the locusts point to Arabia. The locusts were likened to horses prepared for battle. The Arabians, unlike the Goths, Vandals, and Huns, were an army of horsemen and moved over a country almost with the swiftness of the locust. Here we see the gold on his head, the turban. Let the reader note the following facts concerning the Arabs. They came forth from the home of the locusts. They all fought on horseback. There was not a foot soldier in the armies, which in AD 632 assailed the Roman Empire, the Eastern Empire. They wore upon their heads something like crowns of gold. The historians often speak of them as the turbaned Arabs. Ezekiel 23:42, if you want to look at that, speaks of the Sabaeans, which were an Arabian tribe, the Sabaeans of the wilderness, who put on their heads beautiful crowns. Now this is from Ezekiel 23. You might want to look that up. But he's a bushy guy, huh? He certainly has the face of a man, and he has a gold turban on his head. The yellow turban of the Arab horseman, at a little distance, would strikingly resemble crowns of gold. The locusts had the faces of men. The Jews and Arabs wore long patriarchal beards. The Roman and northern races shaved their face. John notes that these locusts have the distinguishing marks of manhood in the east, the unshorn beard. But to the faces of men add the hair of women. The female distinction is long hair, and evidently John beholds, and then, as the riders rush by, long hair flowing from their shoulders and streaming in the air. Did the Arabs in the 7th century wear long hair? Pliny, who was the contemporary of John, speaks here of the turbaned Arabs with their uncut hair. Ammianus Marcellinus, I guess, in the 4th, and Jerome in the 5th century, each speak of the long-haired Arabs. And Antara and Abla depicted on a 19th century Egyptian tattooing pattern. An Arab poem, Antar, written in Muhammad's time, often speaks of their heroes, the hair of heroes flowing down upon their shoulders. We quote, "He adjusted himself, twisted his beard, and folded his hair under his turban, drawing it up from his shoulders." Turban seen from the back. Turbans represented crowns. I interrupt John's explanation here to say that I remember having read that the turban was considered a crown by the ancient Arabs. Each man considered himself a king in his own large or small domain. They did represent crowns. The yellow color was meant to simulate gold. Here's the breastplate of iron. John, commenting on the text that says, but the locusts had breastplates of iron. The historian of the Arabian wars constantly speaks of the iron coats of mail. Muhammad in the Quran says, God has given you coats of mail to defend you in your wars. I believe this is the tomb of Muhammad, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, Muhammad's tomb. Other details from Johnson. Many corroborations might be added. Muhammad was literally a fallen star. He was a prince by birth, the heir of the rule of Mecca, but his grandfather and father dying while he was young, he was pushed aside and became a servant. The locusts came out of the smoke. The Arabs were unknown as a conquering power before Muhammad. The smoke of his imposture filled them with the fierce, stern fanaticism of the Quran. Here we have another view of their conquest. We've seen this one before. They had literal orders in their invasion not to destroy vegetation, cut down no palm trees, nor burn fields of corn, destroy no fruit trees. Now when they say corn, it means grain. They had no corn in the old world at that time. That's a new world crop. Destroy not fruit trees. Gibbon, Volume 5, so forth. Gibbon is Edward Gibbon, who wrote Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. So he tells about this. Passing other marks, their destructive work was to continue 5 months or 150 years. Now, this is Saudi Arabia, the source of Muhammad and the Muslims, the Arab Muslims, and shows how they went out of there to conquer other countries, other parts of the world, out of the Middle East or Near East, and Africa, North Africa, and some parts of Eastern Europe. Though Muhammad's work began earlier, it was in AD 632 that the Arab hosts burst forth from the desert to assail the world. Within 100 years, Palestine, Syria, Mesopotamia, Egypt, the north of Africa, and Spain had fallen beneath their sway. Now I'm still quoting Johnson. The brown, orange, and tan show the greatest extent of the Muslim conquest. This is, of course, the Arab Muslims. This, I guess this is Constantinople or maybe Baghdad. Oh, Baghdad, okay. Baghdad became the capital. I don't think it was at the time Mecca, I think Mecca or Medina. But Baghdad became the capital of the Muslim, empire. In 762, the capital of the Saracen Empire was placed at Baghdad, and their rulers began to cherish peaceful ideas. In 781, the Caliph Harun al-Rashid was their ruler. This is the golden age of the Saracen power. This is the era of the Arabian Nights. Baghdad was called the City of Peace. How long is this from the time when the torment that had stricken half the old world began, half the world began? This is a coin of Al-Rashid. The Arab coins have no pictures of men or animals on them. They would consider that idolatry. In AD 632, the Arabs assailed the nations to which date 150 years may be added. This would bring us to 782, the second year of Harun al-Rashid's reign. Did the torment continue longer? Nay, no. He was engaged in friendly correspondence with the Christian rulers of Europe, and from this time the Saracens ceased their efforts to make the world Mohammedan. Their aggressive wars as conquering empire were over. Now in our own day they've risen again trying to reestablish the caliphate, but we're talking about this at that time, this 150-year period. Conclusion to this part. From the lands of the locust and horse, there came an army of horsemen, as if driven by demons, to destroy everything in their path. Few were actually killed in their wars, literally that is, because of their overwhelming numbers. They just overwhelmed them, and people just surrendered without resistance. Most submitted without resistance, then found if they were not Arabs, they suffered as second-class citizens and had little freedom. The Muslim laws were very burdensome, and punishment for transgressions was harsh. Now we know that today their law is called Sharia law. It's very strict, very harsh. They chop the hands off thieves and so forth, and they kill people for little or nothing, even their own people. The Muslims respected Christians and Jews, people of the book. At that time they did. They don't anymore. Our fellow descendants of Abraham, either physically or spiritually, and most cases gave them a pass, but did treat them as second-class citizens. Again, we see God's providence at work. As we will see in the closing verses, the Eastern Empire and its worship had become as corrupt as the Western Church had been, especially in the worship of saints and angels and the use of icons and relics. Here's the black stone I told you about in the beginning in the Kaaba, and everybody, all of them that go through there, march around that Kaaba. They finally get into the Kaaba, and they get to go through it, and they get to kiss or touch that black stone, which is thought to be a meteorite. Now it probably was pretty rough, had a pretty rough surface at one time, but it's been rubbed smooth by the lips and hands of all the people that touch it and kiss it. The black stone in the Kaaba, probably a meteorite. No way to test it. Although the Muslims never completely eradicated the worship of objects, like the black stone of the Kaaba, from their practices, Muhammad was adamant in his hatred of idolatry. His ire was directed against the pagans and idolaters of his time who were shown no mercy. Although he claimed visions from Gabriel, Christians believe these were visions from demons or not really seen at all. Remember what Paul said, if we are an angel from heaven should preach any other gospel, let him be accursed. Given divine attributes, that's black stone we're talking about. Given divine attributes, looks like they're holding the umbrella on it, so it must be outside. The black stone was a symbol of divine power and is very old. It is believed by Muslims to have been given by the angel Gabriel to Abraham. Some Muslims deny this, but there are historical records that show that the black stone, a meteorite, was worshipped as an idol before Muhammad. The pagans, worshippers of Artemis in Ephesus, worshipped a similar stone. We don't know if it's black or not, but we know it's a stone that supposedly fell from heaven, and you read about that in Acts 19:23 through 36 if you'd like to pause these and look that up. That's very interesting. They worshipped a meteorite, and they believe it had something to do with the idol Artemis. It might have been a part of the idol. They might have put it in the idol as a part of it. Here we see the same, similar. Doesn't show Spain, but the terrible Turks. Okay, they didn't conquer Spain, and they didn't go quite as far as the Arabs did in some places, but they conquered Constantinople later. The terrible Turks. Next to come on the scene were the Turks, who crossed the Euphrates and in their turn became masters of the Muslim lands. Whereas the Arabs before them in their conquest did not have firearms, the Turks did have rifles and cannon. It was the Turks who finally captured Constantinople and ended the Roman Empire in the east. The Eastern Roman Empire, also known as the Byzantium Empire. There's the Euphrates River. I'm going to stop my oral presentation here and maybe do this other part some other time, and I'd like to make a video of what I've done, and at the end of the video you'll see it'll go through the Turk part quickly, because I'm not going to comment on any of those, but I'm basically doing just the Arab Muslims in this video. Okay, thank you for watching. Stay tuned. I don't know if I'll ever get to the other one or not, but I'll try.